Hello everybody, welcome back. Good to see you all again, even though I can't see you. Anyway, so we're going to be tackling a new subject in linguistics this week, and this week it is syntax. Syntax is the study of the ordering of components in phrases and sentences. For many linguists, syntax is one of the most important fields of study because it is syntax that allows us to combine words into phrases and sentences in unique ways, and that's something that's pretty darn unique about human language. So, just like in the last video, we couldn't talk about everything in phonology, just like we can't talk about everything in syntax, but we're going to focus in on tree structures today. These are a really valuable thing that linguists use to structurally represent what's going on in a language. How do they organize words into phrases and sentences? And language differ in these rules in that respect. So, first, you might be looking at this phrase wondering, what does this mean? Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. This is a really famous sentence that was coined by Noam Chomsky, basically to illustrate the importance of syntax. So you might look at this and immediately recognize that there's something wrong. It doesn't make any sense, or very little sense. But there's also something right about it. It's a perfectly well-formed sentence in English syntactically. That is, you have two adjectives preceding a noun, which precede the verb sleep, and then you have an adverb coming after it. So all of those elements are in the right order. It's a perfectly well-formed sentence, and it therefore illustrates that syntax is a real thing, even if it doesn't make any sense semantically. So in this video, we're going to be talking about three things. We're going to talk about lexical categories, otherwise known as parts of speech, which will be important for understanding phrase structure rules, which in turn will be important for understanding how to draw tree structures or tree diagrams. Alright, so first let's talk about lexical categories, which is really just a fancy way of saying parts of speech. But get in the habit of saying lexical category. I think it makes a little bit more sense than parts of speech, which is a phrase you probably remember from English class. Anyway, when we're talking about drawing tree structures, it's really important to know these lexical categories, and you probably know most, if not all of them. But anyway, let's just briefly review what they are. So a noun, typically it's some sort of person, place, or thing. As a subject in English, they're nouns. They pretty much have to be nouns. So cat, house, swimming pool, person, place, or thing. Adjectives are always going with nouns because adjectives describe or modify nouns. Red, big, huge, that sort of thing. Verbs are the action in the sentence, so it's denoting some sort of action or event. So swim, live, is, those are all instances of verbs. Adverbs go with verbs, just like adjectives always go with nouns, and it's easy to forget that, but adverb has the word verb in it, so use that as a mnemonic device to remember. Adverbs are always describing verbs, just like adjectives are always describing nouns. In English, you almost always know that you're dealing with an adverb because most of the time the word will end in ly. There are some exceptions though, like friendly or ugly. Those are actually adjectives because they always describe nouns. But things like quickly, slowly, those describe verbs, and as such we'd want to call them adverbs. Pronouns are very similar to nouns. They behave almost the same exact way as nouns in English, but I'm treating them as two different things just to kind of get you used to this technical difference between the two. So pronouns are always kind of pointing to someone or something, like that, or not that actually, you, he, she, it. So it's representing a person or a thing. Determiner is the next one, and I want to call your attention to this one because your book doesn't cover determiners. It just mentions articles, a, an, or the. Articles and determiners, in this class you can pretty much use them interchangeably because we're not going into any great detail with either one of them. But technically there is a difference. Articles are part of a bigger category called determiners. Determiners also include things like possessive pronouns like his, her, your, demonstratives like this, that, these, those, quantifiers like one, some, many, that sort of thing. So maybe get used to the distinction between articles and determiners, but in this class you can use the two interchangeably. It's totally fine. This last one, maybe you've never heard before. It's called an adposition. It includes something that you've definitely heard before, a preposition. A preposition is sort of asserting the trajectory towards something, like to in to the house, or from as in from the pool, near as in near the mountain. So it has something to do in English with the direction or location of something. But what makes those prepositions in English is that they precede that object complement. They always go before it. Hence preposition, preposition. But some languages do the opposite. They do what's called postpositions, like Japanese, Turkish, or Quechua. They use not prepositions, but postpositions, so the thing comes after the object or complement. And both of those together, prepositions and postpositions, are part of a bigger category, adpositions. Knowing these is going to be really important in order to draw accurate tree diagrams. Alright, so now let's talk about phrase structure rules. This is where we can start to see how languages distinguish themselves from one another. Because while a lot of different languages have nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs, it's the phrase structure rules that basically tell you how you can combine those elements and which orders are acceptable to form sentences in that language. So here we have phrase structure rules. But keep in mind that these are the phrase structure rules for English. So let me just break down what this code means. So the first one is S arrow NPVP. That basically is shorthand that linguists use to say that an S, or a sentence, consists of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. You have to have both the noun phrase followed by the verb phrase in that order in English to have a well-formed, acceptable sentence. So what goes into a noun phrase, you may ask? Well, a noun phrase consists of a noun, minimally. You have to have a noun. You could have a noun phrase that is actually just one word. I know it sounds weird that a whole phrase could consist of just one word, but that's technically true. However, you'll notice that these parentheses are around things like determiners, adjectives, and a prepositional phrase that we'll get to in a second. The parentheses mean that they are optional. You don't need them, but you very often get them in noun phrases. So you could have something like just house. That could be a noun phrase. But it could also be something like the red house, or the red house on the corner as a prepositional phrase. So a prepositional phrase, then, you have to have a preposition and a noun phrase. So again, that preposition, to, near, by, across, from, those are all examples of prepositions in English. But they always come with some sort of noun phrase. So near the pool, by the mountain. The pool, the mountain, those are examples of noun phrases in English. And then a VP, a verb phrase, minimally consists of a verb. You could have a verb phrase that is just one word, just a verb, and that's fine. But very often in English, you get more than that. You get optionally a noun phrase followed by a prepositional phrase, and you very often get an adverb. Now note that I've put an adverb over here, but it could very often precede the verb in English, like he quickly ran, or he ran quickly. Either one, it's totally fine. English allows a lot of freedom of movement for adverbs. So just note also that these phrase structure rules are a little bit different in your textbook. This is a little bit more technically correct because it'll allow us to talk about ambiguity in tree structures in just a moment. So I'd invite you to kind of remember these and the ones in Yule, but these are a little bit more specific. So just a note to keep track of those.